Where are all the good men at? This is a question that's becoming more and more prevalent. And as a man, I want to give my very biased opinion on this, because if you're searching for a mate in life, which is something that's very important, then this is an important topic. And what I'm going to say in this video, it's not going to be what you want to hear. All right, if you're looking for that, click off this video and watch something else. Again, I'm going to give my very biased opinion on this as a man, and this is just based off my observations and me just existing in this reality. And men, don't let me speak for y'all, all right? Be sure to share your opinion down in the comments below. If I say something you don't agree with, or if you have your own ideas on where good men are at, share that in the comments below, because that's going to help whoever is watching this video. So the first, most fundamental thing that you have to understand about where all the good men went, they're in your 20s where you left them. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to make this all doom and gloom. And this isn't like a hit video either. It's not to make people feel bad or to pin the blame on any one sex or person or anything like that. That's not what this is about. All right, so staying away from that, where are all the good men? So from my experience, most of the good men are out chasing excellence. They're doing things that doesn't really put them in the limelight, so they're kind of hard to find. Most good men have big dreams, they have ambition, they go after the things in life they want, and those are the things that they're focused on. They're not really focused on going out and going on dates and attracting women and finding women and sleeping around and all that kind of stuff. They're not going to bars, they're not out being super social. You know, a lot of that stuff just isn't a priority for most good men, because they're out chasing excellence. They're pursuing their dreams and going after their passion. So if you want to find those kinds of men, you're not going to find them in bars and clubs for the most part. You're going to be more likely to find them in places that fit their environment, which could be anything. I mean, if you think about what a man likes and what a man goes after, that's the places where the men are going to hang out. And those are the people they're going to surround themselves with. So if you can insert yourself into those kinds of social settings or put yourself around those groups of people, then you're going to be more likely to cross paths with a good man. And that brings up another really good point, is that most good men actually are glossed over whenever we're in our younger years, and that's pretty much a fact. And the reason for that isn't because the good men are nerdy or they're not attractive or anything like that. It's because when we're young, you know, women specifically, they're going after the bad boy type for the most part. They're going after the guy that's actually going to attract them. And from my experience, most good men aren't really that good at seduction. They're not good at attracting women. They're not the type of guy that's going to walk up to a woman and say hello. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It could come down to the fact that maybe those men are kind of shy. You know, walking up to an attractive woman and saying hello is something that kind of makes them nervous. I can relate to that because I used to be in that situation in my younger days, my teenage years and stuff like that. I was terrified to talk to women. I still did it. I sucked at it, but it took a lot of courage for me to do that, and there were a lot of opportunities I passed up because I was simply too afraid to do it. And from what I've seen, that's true for a lot of good men. Some of the good men, not all of them, are going to be introverts, so they're not used to just going up to people and starting conversations. And like I mentioned before, they're probably preoccupied with something else. They're chasing something, or they're bettering themselves, or they're actively pursuing something. They're just doing something that's important to them, because maybe dating and being in a relationship and chasing girls isn't something that's really that important. And really what this kind of boils down to is just making sure that you really understand what the definition of a good man is. Because if you think a good man is a guy that's going to seduce you and he's going to be hyper attractive and he's going to check all the boxes, then you might be in for a little bit of an unpleasant surprise, because not all good men are going to fit into that category. And I'm not saying it's about lowering your standards, but maybe it's about raising your standards. Because if you're going after the hyper attractive guys and the guys that are going to be very good at seducing you, those are usually the guys that fit the category of high standard. But they're not really high standard, because in a lot of cases, those are the guys that are probably going to run out on you the first chance they get. Those are the guys that aren't going to be very loyal. Those are the guys that sometimes don't have a lot going for them. And those are the guys, not in all cases, but some cases, that aren't really good men. So by reevaluating what your definition of a good man is, you might find that some of those standards seem to lower, but you're actually raising your standards because now you're going after a higher quality man. And that's what's really important. And when it comes to the people that you'd want to surround yourself in life, those are the qualities that really matter. It's not looks, it's not attractiveness, it's not how well they can seduce you, it's not how good they are in bed. It is quite literally how good of a man they are. And the way these guys look and the way they carry themselves and how good they are at socializing and all these things might be a little different than what you're used to. So keep that in mind. And something else that's very important to understand about good men, and this is especially true for high value men, is that a lot of good men have just gotten tired of putting up with crap. All right, because in today's world, men have kind of been demonized. All right, and I'm not trying to say that we've got it bad and we've got, woe is me and all this stuff. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that there's an agenda, and there has been for a while, that is kind of geared towards demonizing men. All this stuff about toxic masculinity and how, men are just so horrible, and we need to be more, sympathetic and empathetic, and we need to be more feminine and all this stuff. A lot of guys are just getting kind of tired of hearing that. So they're less likely to put up with crap. And because of that, a lot of guys have kind of signed off. They've removed themselves from the dating pool. They're following this men go your own way thing now, where you basically just do whatever the heck you want. You still date, you're still in relationships. You can still do all that stuff, but you just go your own way. You forge your own path. You're not worried about chasing women. You're not worried about women in general. And in some cases, guys completely swear off dating altogether because of the way society is now set up, which is, for the most part, not in favor of men. When it comes to family court, getting married, starting a family, all that stuff there is definitely not geared in favor of men. Because if you get divorced, there's a very good chance that the man is going to lose everything he's worked his entire life to build. And not only is he going to lose all his things and all his money, he's also going to lose his kids. He's going to go from being 100% dad to a 15% dad. And for a lot of guys, that's a very tough pill to swallow. And a lot of guys simply don't want to be involved in that. And for a lot of those men, once they've crossed over that line, there's no bringing them back. So those are men that simply aren't going to be in the dating pool anymore. So just keep that in mind. That's where some of the good men have gone. And that brings up another really good point, is that some men just want peace and freedom. That's all they want. And peace and freedom can be a very hard thing to obtain. And matter of fact, it's one of the hardest things that we can attain in life, because as men specifically, we are surrounded by a bunch of toxicity. We have all this anti-men agenda going on around us. A lot of us are getting very tired of hearing it. We have the family court system that's geared against us. There's all this stuff that's kind of noise in the background that really disrupts our peace. And for most men, that's all we want in life. We just want peace and quiet. And some men have found that for them to be able to obtain that peace and quiet, they have to be alone. And when I say alone, I mean alone, like nobody else. Not dating, not being in a relationship, not going out and hanging around people, just being outside with your dog, like not having people around. That's really what it boils down to. So those men are going to be very hard to find. Not saying it's impossible to find those men, but again, you have to go where they are. You have to meet them where they're at. And in some cases, for some of these men, it means meeting them on the side of a mountain in the middle of the woods somewhere. And that brings up another really good point, is that a lot of good men are just out working. They don't have time to go out and chase women or to put themselves out there so that women can find them. I don't think it's any secret that the cost of everything in America has gone up while wages haven't really risen. So for most people, we have to work our butts off, and we have to work our butts off a lot in order to make ends meet. So a lot of good men, just like a lot of people in general, are just out there busting their butt trying to make ends meet. And what does that mean? It means that you don't really have that much time to have a social life. So stumbling across these good men is becoming more and more rare, just because they're not out there in the natural world. They're stuck at work chasing money just like the rest of us. And that can be a tough situation, because it's not like you can just show up at random workplaces and say, hey, where are all the good men at? But you're going to be more likely to find those types of good men at places where people have to go. Maybe the grocery store. Maybe, just out in town shopping around. Maybe public gatherings that don't really involve bars and clubs. Those are the places you're more likely to find those types of good men. But also keep in mind that, again, those men probably aren't going to approach you. So keep that in mind and be willing to put yourself out there. I know the dating app Bumble was kind of a big hit because women had to take the first step. They had to initiate the conversation. And that appeals to a lot of guys, because most guys are so used to having to do that. And quite frankly, it can be exhausting, especially for good men, because they're not really that good at attracting women. And they get so used to being shot down that they eventually just give up. They're like, why is it even worth trying? So when Bumble came out, it kind of flipped the script, and it made women take the first step and initiate that conversation. And that was a huge help for a lot of guys, especially guys that aren't used to walking up to a woman and knowing what to say. Because even over text, it's hard to know exactly what to say to break the ice. And something I've noticed about women is that most women, when they're attracted to you, they kind of position themselves into your environment, into your surroundings. And it's a very intentional thing. It's kind of a soft nudge to the man, telling the man to approach the woman. But some guys don't pick up on that. And again, some guys are just too shy or don't know what to say. So if that's you and you see somebody that you would consider a good man or high value man, and you want to attract that man, consider taking it a step further. Instead of just putting yourself in that person's surroundings, start the conversation. Sometimes it takes something that blatantly obvious for a man to know and understand that you're actually attracted to them, and that you want the man to talk to you, because some men just aren't that cued into that kind of stuff and they're not going to pick up on it. And that brings up yet another very important point, and that is that you might not want to be so quick to dismiss the men that actually do walk up to you and approach you. And I'm specifically referring to the men that you may not necessarily be immediately attracted to, because those men could in fact be good men. And just because their approach is a little sloppy and they kind of make a fool of themselves and they're a little awkward when they approach you and what they say doesn't really make sense, doesn't necessarily mean they're a creep. It doesn't mean that they're an idiot or that you should dismiss them or make fun of them or laugh them off. It could mean that it took everything in them to approach a woman that they thought was highly attractive. And by you simply blowing them off or brushing them off or making a spectacle out of them, there's a very good chance that you could very easily be dismissing a very good high value man. So what I'm really saying here is to consider giving those guys a chance, because there's a very good chance that those are high value men. And there's also a very good chance that if they were awkward on their approach, then it probably took everything in them to approach a woman that they find highly attractive. And if you mock them, roll your eyes at them, or make a spectacle out of them, there's a pretty good chance that those men are eventually going to go their own way. And when they do that, they've just removed themselves from the dating pool, making your dating pool even smaller than it already is. And those are good, high value men that you will no longer have access to. So before you dismiss the guy because he wasn't up to your standards or because he was very awkward on his approach, keep those things in mind. And I'm not saying that you have to significantly lower your standards or go on a date with somebody that actually is a creep. I'm just saying, don't be so quick to judge. Just like men are expected to be empathetic of the fact that the guy had to muster up the courage to come up and talk to you. And for a lot of guys, that's a huge feat. It's something that takes a lot of courage, so respect that. So I really think a lot of this can be summarized by saying that if you want to find a good high value man, it's really just about meeting the men where they're at and respecting the man. Not only respecting the man, but respecting where they're at in their life, respecting where men in general are at currently. And based off my observations and me existing in this world, this is kind of where men are at. So hopefully this gave you some valuable insight on where good men are at. Again, this might not be what you want to hear, but this is the truth. This is kind of where men are at. And for all the men out there, like I mentioned before, don't let me speak for you. Comment down below, share your thoughts on this, share your opinion. This is going to help people out. For everybody else, I hope you got some value out of this. Let me know what you think down below. And if you want some perspective on why more and more men are choosing not to get married and start a family, click on this video right here.